Hey family, thank you for tuning into Our Roots podcast with Joseph Baba Ifa. We're only the strongest roots, see the light, brought to you by Botánica candles and more. And if you haven't had the opportunity, hit that subscribe button. What's up, Phil?
Happy Sunday, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, man. It's a pleasure to see you, everybody here. Guys, also, like I say this on every episode, join our membership program. It offers tons of perks for everybody, you know, extra shows, private shows, early releases, discounts of merch. We got a whole plethora, I think that's the word, plethora,
Yeah.
plethora of content for you guys. I mean, this channel already has over 1,000 videos, but
Yeah.
if you want more, hit that join button. So what's up, bro?
Good, man. And I was also seeing that we're almost at 130,000 subscribers, man.
I'm sure we'll hit that before we even leave here today.
Yeah. We're really, really close. Yeah, definitely before this video is released. And, you know, humbling stuff, man. A couple other things going on before we delve into today's video. Be sure to check out the classes that we have available at Joseph Baba Ifa School, right? We have the 4-week curriculum, which is mentioned here. And the Moyuba class is also out and running with great responses and great matriculation. So definitely that, the membership program, any way we can get in contact with you, we're here willing and able.
Yeah, so what are we talking about today?
Well, the thing is the Hand of Ifa video did so well and it brought in so many questions, we had to do a part 2, which is what we're doing today. And we're basically just responding to all of the questions that spawned from the bombastic success of the Hand of Ifa video.
Now, the Hand of Ifa video, would you say that would be like, let's say someone is new to Ifa, would that be kind of like one of the first ones that they should watch on the channel?
Yeah, it's kind of like I said in that video. That probably should have been the first video we came out with, you know, but the podcast wasn't running then. I had done it in a couple different segments, but nothing as cumulative and comprehensive as the one that we came out with, at least at this moment, a couple weeks ago. So yeah, but definitely for anybody that's interested, you know, the Hand of Ifa video is the first resource, because ideally that would be your first step. And there was actually, and the question, you have it there in front of you, a gentleman that reached out on Instagram. Could you mention who that was, by the way, as far as tag?
Yeah, his name is O_C81.
Nice. Well, shout out to him. Thank you for the question. Great question. If you could read it, please, Phil.
Yes, sir. All right. First question here. It says, may I ask a question? Hopefully you can address it on your podcast. So yes, we are. All right.
Like right now.
Oh.
Here we go. It says, in your last 𝗃𝗏𝗍 podcast, you mentioned that receiving 𝗃𝗏𝗍 is the very first thing you receive. The question I have is, does that depend on the house? Because in my house, we receive guerreros first, then mano, etc. I was wondering, which is the more traditional way about going about receiving those energies? Thank you and bendiciones.
Absolutely. You sound very Cuban with that accent there, Phil. Awesome. But with this question, right, you know, it's a house thing to a certain degree, but what happens is the Hand of Ifa collectively within the Afro-Cuban Lukumi tradition is known as a plante, right? The word plante comes from basically Cuban vernacular, estoy plantado, like, you know, I'm planted, like I'm busy, like we're doing something, we're doing a collective of things today. And within the plante concept, the Hand of Ifa obviously is there, and then right before that is the warriors. So what happens is, technically you're receiving them simultaneously, but even more with technicalities, Eshu is received first. So if you come from a house where Hand of Ifa is not readily an option or they have to outsource it, receiving the warriors first is fine, the warriors. Now here's the issue though. If it is being given by someone other than a Babalawos, the only thing they could provide is Orisha, is 𝗃𝗏𝗍𝗁 rock, right? Which is actually an extension of the rock that goes on top of the Eshu head that the Babalawos gives in the Hand of Ifa usually. Your Egun and 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 pot with all the tools and things that go inside there. They have the posterity to be able to do that. But that's really it. Because technically Eshu, Egun, and 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏 are the warriors. Osun is technically not one of the warriors and should not be confectioned or given by anybody that is not Babalawos. The warrior concept was born in the Odu of Egun Osun, where the warriors actually tricked Osun, who was not a warrior, into getting drunk, and they ate 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲's goat and wiped the blood on Osun's lips. When he woke up, he had to take the blame for it, unfortunately. So Osun, from that day forward, really was like, I want nothing to do with them. And Orunmila actually adopted him or picked him up after 𝗶𝗸𝗏 kicked him out of the house, because there's another pataki, also in the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁, amongst others, where Egun did an unthinkable act with his mother. And the way he was able to get away with it was he threw corn that was saturated with liquor to Osun, thus leaving him in an inebriated state, where Egun was able to do his unthinkable deed. And 𝗶𝗸𝗏 cursed him, and he said, from this day forward, I don't want you. So Orunmila, who was actually the younger sibling, took Osun and made him his personal staff. Osun, from that day forward, said, I don't want to deal with any Orisha other than Orunmila, and that's why Orunmila is the one that confections him. Apart from that, 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝘁𝗍, Osun speaks of it, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗁𝗃, itinerary, all of those Odu speak of that. So that's why technically Osun is not part of the warriors. He is given with Orunmila, together in conjunction, because he is Orunmila's staff. So it speaks of that. Now, so that's what they'd be able to give you versus what a Babalawos can give you. A Babalawos can give you the warriors before the Hand of Ifa. I'm not a fan of doing that, simply because you're going to have to pay more than what's necessary, because even if you receive the warriors before your Hand of Ifa, the warriors still have to go through the same process of being fed and whatnot during your Hand of Ifa. So rather than having you, misallocate an extra $1,000 or so, it's better for you to just get that one consolidated amount, get everything at once, and we can move on and focus on future things.
So does it matter, though, that their way that is different? Not the order is different. Does it matter, or do you have the Hand of Ifa got to be first?
Technically, no. Well, here's the thing: to be able to realize the hand, because even within the Hand of Ifa only represents a section of the ceremony. Before you can actually begin the Hand of Ifa, the warriors have to go through their process. So it's just happening simultaneously. But some people, I think the biggest thing is when people are getting involved in the faith, they kind of want to feel it out initially. These are large ticket items as well. So somebody might hear and be like, okay, Hand of Ifa is, I don't know, $3,000 or something like that. And they're like, well, that's kind of steep. I'd rather start with a more accessible option. The ethical behavior on behalf of the priest is to let them know, hey, just so you know, even though you're spending this for something you would receive over here anyway, you still have to pay the premium, So I think as long as everybody's honest with each other, the decision is theirs. Everybody's economic situation is their own. But from a value standpoint, the Hand of Ifa is unmatched. And then from a practicality as well as spiritual standpoint, it's what needs to occur, because this also segues into another question, is that, what do we receive when we go through the Hand of Ifa? Now, from an 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 standpoint, you just receive Orunmila, right? Eshu plays a huge role, but you don't actually receive him there. On the contrary, he is offered to on your behalf via your Orula. So you would just have Orunmila, your Hand of Ifa, and, for the people who know what's in there, they know. And now what would occur at that point is that if your Odu is affiliated with Eshu, or you're identified, being that we don't know what clan you come from, to be a follower or a disciple of Eshu, at that point they would probably confection an Eshu for you, probably 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏, which is actually the same one that's usually composed within the Afro-Cuban Lukumi tradition, because technically all of the Eshus that we know of, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, Eshu Laboni, Eshu, all of these people are technically under the category of 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏, right? So that's what you receive in the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 tradition. In the Lukumi tradition, you should receive your Eshu, right? 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, or one of the paths that your godfather has identified for you as compatible. In our personal situation, we confection 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗏 for everybody. And the reason being is this. Let's say the Eshu that I identify for the person is born in the Odu of, I don't know, 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏, right? It's an Eshu from 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏. Okay. But what happens when in the Hand of Ifa and the divination is performed, the person's 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏? Now, 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏 and 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏 are mortal enemies. They should never fraternize, right? To a certain degree. But I just gave you an Eshu from an Odu that is completely incompatible with you. So I actually poisoned you instead of giving you medicine. So that's why, if people want to get more specific Eshus, at least the people that don't want to do Ifa, because for the brothers that are going to do Ifa anyway, I tell them just to stick with that Eshu until they do Ifa, and they can mount their own Eshus afterwards. I don't need to get an extra couple dollars out of you if you're trying to be a Babalawos anyway. Now, if you're somebody that has no desire or capabilities of becoming Babalawo, if you want an Eshu from your sign, which is guaranteed compatibility for 99.99% of the time, absolutely. You can have as many Eshus as you take care of. You're also going to receive your Egun no 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, right? Which is, pretty innovative compared to the 𝘃𝗶𝗃𝗏 part. You get Osun, which is Orunmila's staff. And once again, 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁, for the most part, in 𝘃𝗶𝗃, from what I've seen, is property of Babalawos, and is consecrated by Babalawos. Just like in the Lukumi tradition, anybody that's not a Babalawo should not be giving koko to Osun, because Osun didn't want to interact with any Orishas because they all betrayed him. So 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁 is confectioned by Awos and usually given to Awos. But in the Afro-Cuban tradition, being that we didn't know if we were going to survive or who was going to last, they were like, well, let's give as much as we can up front so there's a rate of survival here. But in antiquity, 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗁 was always property of Babalawos and lived at the Babalawos' front door to scare away the 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗃. That's in the 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗃𝗃 and 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏. But in the Lukumi tradition, you'll receive that. And everybody receives Orunmila because it's the Hand of Orunmila or Hand of Ifa. So that's what you'd be receiving on either side. Now, there are variations now. There is hybridization, which isn't horrible, as long as you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you're not sacrificing one tradition for another. The big issue we have now is like, oh, well, the Lukumi tradition, the nangareo isn't, traditional, so remove it. But they're not removing it because they necessarily have an ideological aversion to it. They're removing it to save time and money. That's really the issue. When you start hybridizing in a way to convenience your pockets or your schedule, that's unacceptable. Because at the end of the day, ceremony is ceremony. I mean, if you're finishing at 1 in the morning, you're finishing at 1 in the morning. But you should get a good night's rest because you know you did the right thing. So,
okay. So I think we should do this maybe like 1 or 2 every episode, like, questions and stuff.
Absolutely, like follow-ups.
Yeah. So let everybody know how they can actually leave us a question, right? Obviously, you can comment on any of the videos and we should see them. But if you want to do an official way, the website that you guys have, it is botanicacandlesandmore.com. You can click on the contact us button. It's right on the homepage. You can type out a message, or you can actually click on, there's a button that says Our Roots Podcast, right? And if you click on that button, it'll take you to the podcast website, and there you can actually leave us a voice message.
Very nice.
It's a feature we've had for years, but we never really utilize it as much. But it's on that page. It's on the corner, and you just tap it and leave us a voice message. We'll get the notification that you sent a voice message, and we will play it on the podcast. So if you have any questions or anything like that, we can do that. So I think that'd be pretty cool,
Yeah, definitely very cool. And, it respects all of the viewers' schedules as well. For the people who, unfortunately aren't able to make lives and things like that, I think that's a great option. It has a much more interactive feel and, it's much more personal,
Yep.
Get some shine on there.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and start with some of these questions here. We got, like I said earlier, a plethora of questions. So
there you go.
The second question, now these questions don't have any names attached to them, so I'm just going to read them.
Yeah.
So here we go. Why is Hand of Ifa considered an initiation?
Well, here's the thing is initiation by definition denotes change. So for something to be an initiation, you have to have something now that you didn't have before, or something had to have changed. So when we look at certain processes that are recommended other than the Hand of Ifa, most of them are not considered initiation, even though there may be a material aspect of it. For example, like the necklaces. We respect all houses that do it, but as such, the necklaces or the 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃s are not an initiation because you don't get a rank necessarily after that. I mean, even the term 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗏 can't necessarily be attributed to anyone that's received the 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃s because you have not gone through any process that's necessarily occult, right? Or that isn't ready to the public. With the Hand of Ifa, it's an initiation because you're interacting with sacred process that is not readily available to the public. It's like the 𝗃𝗲𝗿𝗃𝗃𝗃 says. Ifa is secret, whether people want to debate that or not, whether it's in 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 or Lukumi. Both processes have things that cannot be recorded or put on camera, right? So in the Hand of Ifa, you go through secret sacred process, and apart from that, things are corporally done to you or to your body to ultimately facilitate a spiritual transformation, leading you to the rank of 𝗀𝗃𝗃𝗃 for women or 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃 for men. So that's why it's technically an initiation, and you have a rank afterwards. That's another big thing. Initiation should give you some type of title. Technically, graduating from college is an initiation because you come out with more than when you entered. So you have people out there who debate this, but I mean, this is the way our ancestors left it. Once you go through the Hand of Ifa, you are part of a house. That spiritual home pertains to you, and all of the benefits that come with it via your elders. So that's why the Hand of Ifa is an initiation. And you look at all of the common themes between that and, for example, the Orisha process or even 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, they all kind of build on each other to a certain degree. You know, as far as conceptually, there's an ita, you know, there's certain similar sacrifices. So it's an initiation for sure. And the first one we should all go through.
Okay. All right. Next question is, what Orishas are received?
Okay, so we went over that. Yeah, in the Lukumi tradition, you get 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝘁𝗃, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗏, and Orula. And usually in the 𝘃𝗶𝗂𝗃𝗃 tradition, you just get the Hand of Ifa with other deities being offered to on the behalf of the ceremony, such as Eshu.
𝗃𝗃 was always first?
Oh, yeah, Eshu's always first. That's why there's this debate of, no, receive your warriors first, but why are we going to pay an extra couple bands for that when you could just receive it in your Hand of Ifa? That's the big thing with our establishment is we don't piece things out because, you know, people are intelligent. You know, they're going to realize, like, okay, at some point, kind of like I did, I could have saved a couple of dollars on the necklaces because I'm going to receive them when I crown Orisha anyway. So why did I, you know, give that ticket amount? Or the warriors, okay, I'm receiving the warriors now, but I could have received them with the Hand of Ifa, so I could have saved some money there towards things in the future. We're very upfront, transparent, and open about this because, you know, business has taught us. This doesn't even have to do with spirituality and ethics. This is just business, common good business practices. You put everything on the table. No hidden fees, no hidden amounts. This is what's coming. I mean, we're to the point where, you know, we let what comes after be known before you take the initial process. Hey, you're going to do Ifa. Welcome, congratulations. We love you. 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗁 is coming at some point. So this is how much it's going to be tentatively, because this is like the stock market. I don't know how the animalero is going to wake up that day. The rooster was this today, but tomorrow is not yesterday's price. So, you know, all of those things are mentioned beforehand because it's good to know those things because you might not want to take that initial step beforehand. And luckily, some establishments are in a situation where they don't have to omit certain information to be able to get said ticket amount and then, you know, have some turnover when, you know, the follow-up fee happens. So we put everything on the table. This is what's expected of you. This is what's coming. Like when my wife does a santo, hey, the 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏 is this much, just so you know before you crown. Now, mind you, time limits and whatnot, I mean, it's good to know that beforehand because you might need some more time to prep. But we say everything up front.
All right. Now, this one is about the ceremonies, okay?
Okay.
So first, it's a two-parter here. So how many days is the ceremony and what actually happens each day?
Okay, so let's go into quantity first as far as dates. I've been in Hand of, and we'll start with 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. I've been in Hand of Ifa processes over there that took 1 day, right? Thoroughly. Now, we started early, ended at a decent time where they fit everything there, right? With the Hand of Ifa, it's pretty commonplace, you know. Eshu is going to be offered to, Orunmila is going to be offered to. You can't have Hand of Ifa on either side without that. And then ultimately it culminates in a divination known as ita, which we'll get into in later questions if I recall. Now, I have seen Hand of Ifa processes over there take as long as 3 days, right? And it actually follows our basic structure in Lukumi, where you can see one came from the other, you know, because they're both real. Where the first day focuses on sacrifice and the last day focuses on ita, or the divination from a revelatory standpoint, you know, where things are brought to knowledge, you know, as far as guardian Orisha, Odu, taboos, if we're going to take advantage of a king there and ask those things. And I have read paperwork. I was actually sent a verse recently by a brother where in the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 or 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 or 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, it actually took 4 days to initiate, where I believe the verse stated of where Orunmila was initiating Oduduwa and his family. And the 4th day was actually a follow-up to make sure everything had gone well the first 3 days. So there are some houses over there in 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 where, okay, we did the Hand of Ifa, let's do a follow-up divination and see how everything was received. I personally don't incorporate that because I feel like the Hand of Ifa is all-inclusive to a certain degree. But, I mean, if the professional feels that strongly about it and the client, feels good about the explanation and is able to make it swing, I mean, you can never be too thorough with these things either. So it really comes down to ideology and literature. But I have seen it going as long as 4 days. Now, more than that, I can't imagine why a Hand of Ifa needs to go unless there's things in a specific verse that mention it. Like there's certain verses or odus that have verses that say, hey, if this is revealed in 𝗀𝗃, the person has to be in a room, or, they can't go, or this or that, like all these little nuances. But that's on a case-by-case basis. But from a regulatory standpoint, I can't imagine why it would go past 4 days from 𝗃𝗃, right?
Have you had longer ones than that?
I've never heard of it. I've never heard of it per se, as far as a Hand of Ifa. Because they all kind of go on that basic lunar rotation, 72 hours, the third day, the stars align, and, you can reveal the information you need. But the fourth day is really a follow-up based on the literature I saw. So after that, I mean, the Hand of Ifa could last 100 days. I mean, depending on, what the person wants to incorporate. But when we're talking about efficiency, proficiency, and precision, me personally, longer than 3 days based on the Lukumi system, I don't see the need for it. But to each his own. But longer than 4, I mean, that'd have to be explained as to why. I haven't interacted with that information.
Now these are all consecutive days, right?
Yeah, it's back to back to back. Okay. Yeah. And we've never had a case, and I think this is another thing. You have to be present. I don't want to, be a stickler for it, but I have heard of people go through processes where they're like, hey, I wasn't there the first 2 days, and then the third day they had me show up. Not a fan of that at all. Ori has to be present. So the divination is not enough, in my humble opinion, because your body has to be taken through so many steps just to be able for Ori to open up and show us the information that we need. So if anybody's talking like that, you may want to look into other options, because you should be there for everything, which is how it was done. I mean, when we look at the first scripture we have from a Lukumi standpoint about the Hand of Ifa is in the 𝗿𝗲𝗹𝗁, where Ochun was running from death, and Orunmila recommended that she marry him to save her. She thought that was a little fresh, but she was like, I don't want to die. So she was present for her whole ceremony. Orunmila actually pulled the same trick in 𝗿𝗲𝗍. I won't say a trick, forgive me. He pulled the same process in 𝗿𝗲𝗍 when he initiated his wife Yemaya as well. So as far as the Hand of Ifa, there's so many odus that speak of when said celestial characters received Hand of Ifa and they were thoroughly and utterly present. So you should be there, no questions asked. Now, in the Lukumi tradition, 72-hour process, and as far as itinerary, the first day is the day of sacrifice, where the things you're going to receive are fed live animals, apart from other nuance, The second day has ceremony, but usually we finish, in a timely enough fashion to be able to get it done the first day. But that's why the second day is usually known as a día de medio. There is ceremony there, but, you can get it done the first day depending on, how productively you're rolling. On the third day is the day of Ita, and in 𝗃𝗃 is known as 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗃, which means, 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗃, where you basically 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗃, where you learn your Ita, or you learn your history. And we're talking about your spiritual history. And your spiritual history, which was identified at the moment of conception and ultimately birth in front of Olodumare. And Orunmila, who is 𝗿𝗟𝗃, or the witness to destiny, is your Odu, as well as your guardian Orisha. So once those things are revealed, basically Ita is facilitated. That's the ultimate goal there, apart from the sacred conversation that's going to happen. Now, mind you, another point to be made is that you should be spoken to that day, right? And that's why I usually don't do more than 4, never more than 5 people at a time, because you got to think, you're paying all this money. You've been waiting 3 days, if not longer, depending on the Babalawos schedule, to get to this moment. You might have been waiting your whole life to get to this moment, and there's nothing worse than the Babalawos just saying, hey, 𝗵𝗶𝗸𝗲, congratulations, you received a Hand of Ifa, listen to your godfather, thank you. Like, no one wants to hear just that 3 times. So we usually take 45 minutes to an hour per person. Now, if that's 4 people, that's 4 hours off rip, out of, a possible 12 to 15-hour workday. So, with the way 𝗃𝗏 usually manifests, because we really don't know how long everybody's life divination is going to take. There's extenuating circumstances, their phenomenon, like depending on the odus, like if a 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 comes out, things need to be done. If a 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗏 comes out, things need to be done. And these are more like imperative examples, but technically something should be done every time an odu is revealed, to be able to mitigate its effects, because it comes in very, very impactful. So, but that's ultimately the rundown as far as itinerary,
Okay. All right. Now we're talking about Egun.
Okay.
All right. Is Egun offered to in this ceremony?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in 𝗃𝗍𝗃, no. The reason being is because in Lukumi we have this concept 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗁, which is not that the dead or death birthed an Orisha or a deity. What 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗁 really translates to is you have to die to become a deity, right? So we have that concept that everything begins with our ancestors. So every ceremony in Ifa and Orisha Lukumi style begins with Egungun. Every single one. It should not be omitted based on what 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗃𝗃 says. But you have some people, they might want to save a couple dollars, not give the chicken, to each his own. But every ceremony that's done within our roots, from a Lukumi standpoint, begins with Egungun in some form or fashion. Now, from an 𝗃𝗍𝗃 standpoint, it begins usually with the osaying process, right? Or the herbs. They omit Egun. And it's not that they're omitting it because they never really had that concept. And it's not that they're any less Egun oriented. It's just that they look at Egun more as an Orisha, right? So why would we just feed a random Orisha like Egungun before beginning a process? As opposed to Lukumi criteria, which is Egungun is more spiritual, right? So our ancestors, nothing happens without them. We stand upon their shoulders. They need to be offered to the point where Egungun is not offered to. And it usually begins with the osaying process. And people are like, well, what about Eshu? Doesn't Eshu always go first? For people who have been through those processes, it's known that Eshu is mitigated another way via that. So even then, even without him being physically present necessarily for that step of the herbs and whatnot, Eshu is still being offered to somehow first. So go through an 𝗃𝗍𝗃 process and you'll understand that. But yeah, Egungun is offered to in every ceremony, including a Hand of Ifa, from a Lukumi standpoint. In 𝗃𝗍𝗃, if Egun was not offered to, don't fret, it's not common.
All right. Next question. What does the process of 𝗃𝗏 look like? Sign, revelation, guardian Orisha?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we could touch on this is because, if somebody, let's say receives Hand of Ifa and they want their wife to be present for 𝗃𝗏 or any of those things, they have that right to do so. So that's why we're able to talk about it. So the first thing that will usually happen, once again, beginning with Egun, is you're going to see there's a breakfast that happens where we offer to Egun. There's the process of the various liquids that are offered, the candles, invocations, but Egun is not fed on 𝗃𝗏. It's just a commemoration. Then, and this is another thing we're going to get into shortly, is the nango process, which is the public breakfast that was adopted from the 𝗃𝗏𝗃, or the 𝗃𝗏𝗃 tribe, as it's known in the Odu 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃. After that, we'll give 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗶 to Eshu and those guys and the warriors to make sure they're good. We have to check in with Orula again before we begin dafā, or to begin pulling iking. And then from there, it's really off to the races. We're going to start pulling. Now, you're going to notice, and the reason we can talk about this is because anybody could watch anybody pull Ifa, and it's the same process every time. You're going to notice something being done known as the desamarre, which for us was identified in the Odu of Ikarete, right? But for 𝗃𝗍𝗃, it's identified in the Odu of 𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃, where Orunmila smacked his mother. So the desamarre, what you're going to see is the Babalawos basically doing a process of putting the king behind his back, right and left. Verses are said. You're going to do some gestures, etc., before he starts pulling. Now in 𝗃𝗍𝗃, they have a beautiful process as well, where they take the king, and in the same fashion that Orunmila hit his mother in 𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃, they hit themselves before they ultimately hit him, because no matter how gentle you try to be, when you're pulling 𝗃, you're slapping one hand against the 𝗃, which manifests Orunmila. So, that's where that manifests from. And then ultimately, we're going to pull that sign out. We're going to identify your prophecy, 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗲. We're going to see, which Orisha is providing or defending. We're going to see what that Orisha wants automatically. We're not going to ask if it wants anything. We're just going to offer it something. And then we're going to try to, as efficiently as possible, get to marking 𝗃𝗶𝗸𝗁. And then from there, we're going to ask if it closes, and usually after the divination is closed is when we ask the guardian Orisha, right? At least in my lineage, they always gave the person 2 free throws. And what I mean by that is, okay, who do you think you're a child of? Egun. Okay, we'll ask for Egun. Either it says yes and we're done, or it says no. We give them another opportunity to ask for somebody. Okay, 𝗃𝗶𝗃𝗃. 𝗃𝗃 said yes. Okay, we're done. No. Then at that point, if you strike out twice, then it's the Babalawos' turn. And then we start asking based on the sign, the Orishas that are most affiliated. Now, with any 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗍, they don't ask Orishas usually. You're able to initiate into whichever Orisha is affiliated with your sign. But I recently was just interacting with a godson of mine, and he was talking about some interactions he was having with some brothers in Nigeria, and he was speaking with a guy from a clan where they actually ask an Orisha. And for the life of me, it escapes the term. The term escapes me that they used. I think it was Orisha Isoni, which means the Orisha that is within, or the Orisha that I'm tied to, right? Instead of saying Orisha 𝗷𝗶𝗸𝗏, because the term 𝗷𝗶𝗸𝗏, even though it can be translated over there and they understand what it means, they use this term instead. So there are an abundance of clans, from what I understand, such as in Ibadan land, that actually identify a head Orisha, right? So that is interesting. And, for anybody that's studied the anthropology behind our Ifa, Ibadan and Osogbo are huge, huge, huge influences on our Ifa, just like Oyo and just like Benin and ultimately Ife. But the first 3 actually influence us a little bit more. And then, once we identify that Orisha, now we have to perform 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗁𝗍, right? No one should get through their Hand of Ifa process without performing 𝗃𝗶𝗱. Now, ideally, the 𝗃𝗶𝗱 that should be performed at that moment is the 𝗃𝗶𝗱 that's written on that piece of paper right there. But let's say your 𝗃𝗶𝗱 takes 2 goats and a pheasant. Well, the animal guy might be at home by that point, so that's going to be pretty impossible. And what ends up happening is we do an 𝗃𝗶𝗱 at that moment to facilitate you being able to get up and leave the ceremony without any harm coming your way, to hold you off until you and your godfather can get coordinated to perform that 𝗃𝗃𝗱 that was recommended. This is a big theme because we get a lot of people that unfortunately are displaced from a spiritual standpoint, looking for a new establishment to carry them forward. And I'm always big about making sure the past is fulfilled with before moving on to the future. Like the 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏 says, we can't move on to something new if we haven't fulfilled something old. So the first thing I ask for, if they're lucky enough to have it, is let me see your information, right? Let me see your paperwork. Let me see what was recommended, literally via 𝗃𝗃. Now, there's a big difference between what's asked through the seeds and what's randomly in the sign written in a book. Those things that are random aren't imperative at the moment. The things that are absolutely imperative are what was identified via the process of yes and no questionnaire through your Hand of Ifa. Those are the things that Ori is saying you promised to give on earth before leaving heaven. And those are the things that have to be done semi-immediately, if not immediately, so that life can start going better, good, or, preserving what you've already been able to accomplish. And the majority of people, unfortunately, have not. So that's a very key thing for all those brothers who are in a similar situation where, you're able to assimilate people. Make sure you look back before you look forward. And the reason being is because if those things aren't done, anything you do for that person is not going to be efficient. So I'm somebody that I'm very particular about my work. I have to make sure that everything we do is results-based and driven, and I don't want anything affecting its proficiency. So to be sure and guarantee that what I'm going to do is going to have a positive effect, I have to make sure that whatever was recommended beforehand is done, because if not, it'll take away my results. It's kind of like a doctor, right? Okay, we're going to do said procedure, but a prerequisite for this procedure is this. if I am more focused on, hurrying up and closing out this ticket rather than doing my due diligence and looking through records and information to help me treat the client better, I could do a huge malpractice, right? And you see that it's running rampant within our practice, where a lot of people have invested a couple of dollars, quite a few dollars towards their spiritual betterment, and they're not seeing the results, even though chickens are dying left and right, and money's moving in different directions, and they're like, why are things going worse for me? It's not that they're going worse, it's just that they're unable to go better until we get things done from beforehand. So all that due diligence needs to happen as well.
Okay. All right, you skipped ahead a little bit when you talked about the nango, but did I say it right?
Nango. Yeah, we can touch on it for sure.
But before we get there, though, the question that we have is about the formal table, right?
Yeah.
What significance does the formal table have?
Yeah, so that they actually go together ultimately.
Two-parter then.
Yeah, so there's a couple different odus that stipulate the table, but the one that speaks the most about it is the in the Lukumi tradition is the odu babao turameji. And tables in Ifa are not a mystery, right? Whenever Babalawos does Ifa, there's a table, a bunch of Babalawos singing and hollering and having a good time, eating and drinking, and smoking a cigar if we're lucky. So it's a good time. But the Hand of Ifa one is much more pristine, simply because it's a little more limited, right? It's a little more solemn. And the reason being is because that table formally happens on the day of 𝗃𝗏. The formal tables happen on 𝗃𝗏, and ultimately in the Ifa on the 𝘃𝗍𝗍. So what occurred was, in the odu babao turameji, 𝗀𝗲 was going through a dilemma because in his land, which in the paperwork was the land of 𝗃𝗏, right, or ultimately Oyo, depending on how you interpret it, there was a lot of turmoil. Like, they were killing each other. There was a lot of salaciousness. There was a lot of nonsense going on. Like, people were robbing each other, killing each other. There was promiscuity. They were going ham. And 𝗀𝗲 didn't know how to get these people under control or to unify them in a way where they could work towards a common goal in front. So he decided to go on a pilgrimage to see how the other kingdoms in Africa were kind of maneuvering. And he started heading east, it says, and he landed or arrived, no planes at the time, he arrived in the land of, it was the hot lands, right? It was where they say it was sandy and that the steam was coming off, which didn't bother 𝗀𝗲. He was fire incarnate. But he did notice, he's like, man, it's really hot. So, but what he did see is when he got there, he saw a throng of people around this huge cauldron, and they were serving each other food. It looked like porridge, and they would pour it on the ground. They would honor the sun and present it to the sun, and they would ingest some, right? And he found this really intriguing, but what was more appalling was how peaceful everything was, even though it was the whole community. So he presented himself formally. They recognized him as a king because of his attire. The king came and greeted him properly, and they started conversing. And 𝗀𝗲 said, my compliments to your public, because I've never seen anything like this. What is this? What are you guys doing? And he said, this is the process of the nango, right? Which loosely translates to the fire has revealed itself. Or the heat has revealed itself. And he said, basically, we have this one custom that keeps us unified and peaceful and loved. And the first thing we do is we make breakfast, right? We make a porridge or an oatmeal, and we honor the sun, right? The central energy. We honor our ancestors by pouring some on the ground, and then we ingest it together, and that maintains us unified. And 𝗀𝗲 was like, man, I would really love to learn how to do that. And, the 𝗃𝗏𝗍 king, or the king of the Imale, it was known, or the people of the light, said, yeah, let's get to know each other a little bit, and I'll teach it to you. And 𝗀𝗲 was like, yeah, sure. So he was invited to stay in the royal compound. He had his own room. And 𝗀𝗲, being 𝗀𝗲, very impatient, stole the nango.
Oh, no.
And they say, he actually stole a piece of red cloth and whatnot, which you could see when the nango is done, etc. And he took it back to Oyo. And, being that he was a cook, he was able to identify every ingredient, recreate it, etc. And he started incorporating it, and he got the same effects, right? But now he had an enemy, To this day, the Hausa and Yoruba people You know, they don't get along too well. You know, there's you know, a little bit of a feud there, but you know, but Shango took it and it benefited his people, and that's why in our clan of Lukumi we incorporate this process when in 𝗃𝗍𝗃 it is not incorporated. So if you went through an 𝗃𝗍𝗃 Hand of Ifa and an 𝗃𝗲𝗋 is not performed, that's okay. That's not innately Yoruba. Being that the Lukumi tradition got the best of everything, we incorporate it, and I couldn't imagine doing without it. And this is where I say, once again, hybridization is good as long as it's edifying traditions. But you'll have some brothers say, oh, the nangareo is not real, let's eliminate it. Why?
Whoa.
It doesn't take any, it takes nothing but time. I mean, we're talking about cornmeal and milk, you know? So, but that's where the nangareo comes from. So, as a New World interpretation, being that we don't eat on esteras or straw mats anymore, we eat at tables, that is a commemoration of what occurred in the nangareo. Because the table, ideally, will happen after the nangareo, being that the nangareo is the first thing the initiate should ingest that day. So, you know, after we do our process outside, we come inside and we sit down and we commiserate. You know, I always explain this pataki when we're going through the table, and I always ask them, you know, when was the last time you sat down with your family like this? And usually everybody's like, you know, in quite some time, because everybody's always working and doing all these other things, which is what was happening in Oyo. So it's a reminder of, hey, we need to be unified and we need to spend time together. But, you know, there's a formal table for breakfast and a formal table for dinner, you know. And actually, I'll touch on the dinner table as well, because there's a different concept in Odu that goes into that one. So in the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗃, it speaks of a Eshu path known as Eshu 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗁. And 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗁 was an Eshu that would hang around the Orisha ceremonies expecting things without doing anything of note. And one day, you know, he kind of, you know, went to the Babalawos and said, aren't you going to feed me? And the Babalawos said, but you haven't done anything. You know, why are you being compensated for anything? So Eshu cried, and he went to the front door, and he was really, you know, he was really sad and depressed. And one of the Santeras there said, hey, why do you cry? He said, because they don't want to give me nothing. And she said, well, have you done anything? He's like, no, but I'm Eshu. She said, everybody's got to play their role here and apport something to this process. So why don't you pick up all the extra bones and animals and things like that and take them? And more than likely, you'll be compensated for it. So he started picking up all the garbage and all the animal parts and whatnot, and he took them, and he was compensated for it. And he said, from this day forward, I'll do this for the rest of, you know, eternity, because this is a sweet job. I mean, I'll never go hungry. So what happens is, and once again, this is public, because in the middle day of the Orisha process, you know, anybody that's in or visiting the Yawo at this point will see this. When the ceremonial eats are being eaten at that point, or in the Hand of Ifa, etc., the bones and the excess, or anybody that's seen an Ifa, the bones and the excess are picked up and taken to the corner, and left there, usually to the left, which manifests Eshu, being that he is 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗁, or the owner of the left. And it'll be deposited there as a commemoration of, hey, this is what we offer to 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗁. So he's compensated, and so he keeps bringing, you know, process to our home, because, you know, the Babalawos, I mean, without a consulta and a Hand of Ifa, you know, we're right back in corporate America. So, you know, it ensures that, you know, if we do things correctly and Eshu is pleased, he keeps bringing people to our home to go through this divine process. So that's the significance of the formal table in the evening, if you ever see that happening. Where the Babalawos in the Ifa is a much more elaborate process to make this happen, and you'll see them yelling, 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗁, Eshu Bao. You know, all those things are making commemoration to the pataki I mentioned, right? And there's even a song for Eshu 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗁.
Okay, is that where the term "bringing something to the table" comes from?
Yeah. 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗁. You can't get something without giving something. You know, you gotta. It's the Ifa of the potluck.
Okay, that's that's interesting.
And that's another thing to note, and it's incredible that you realize that we look at a lot of things that are in our culture that are inexplicable, that once we start studying Ifa, you begin to realize that's where that comes from, or that's where it became commonplace. So you see that a lot with anybody who's Afro-descendant. Like, why do we do the things we do?
Yeah, man. That's
Ifa is the root.
All right, so please excuse me for mispronouncing this, but I think it's 𝗃𝗍𝗃, but I don't know. It's
𝗃𝗍𝗃.
Okay, yeah. So what are those, and why are they important?
So in the Odu of 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗃, it speaks of a pataki where the human beings that were performing at Bo were told to consume the offal, or the entrails of the animal they had sacrificed, right? But due to mistiming and disorganization, they ended up eating the muscular part rather than the other part. And they found the other part to be a little undesirable because of the organs and things like that. They were like, I don't feel like eating any kidneys today. So they ate the muscular part. But what they didn't realize was that the muscular part spiritually deteriorates. You know, it's a part of the animal that doesn't necessarily have any life in it once, or spiritual connotations, once the blood has left. You know, at best, it has some myoglobin. So the Orishas were left with the other parts, and they were like, well, we got no choice but to eat this. And when the Orishas ate that, they became eternal, right? The beings that consumed the 𝗂𝗄𝗃s, or the internal organs, which the word 𝗂𝗄𝗃 means blessing, which makes reference to it being blessed meat, they became immortal. But even they could not consume the intestines, so the intestines were left for the 𝗃𝗏𝗎𝗄𝗏, right? So when we look at ceremonial process, once again, this is public because when you visit the Awo, all the 𝗂𝗄𝗃s are there, everything's there. In 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏𝗁 is where human beings started deteriorating biologically because they consumed that which was biochemically degenerative, right? Or didn't have any spiritual connotation. So they just ate the meat out of desire, right? Even though that meat didn't have any spirituality in it, right? That's why the muscular aspect is for us. But the reason the deities consume things like the liver, the kidneys, the heart, the lungs, in birds like the gallbladder sac, etc., is because the spirituality of life is there, because without those things, life is impossible. So the Orisha said, hey, we'll stay with that and we'll stay eternal. That's why even most human beings are adverse, or really we're not fully prepared to assimilate some of those organic compounds, because we never evolved, because we never did the ebo we were supposed to back in 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗁, which is the odu of the carnivores, right? Amongst many, but one of the focal ones besides 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗁. And then ultimately, even the Orishas were like, we can't do the intestines. I mean, chitlins aren't for us, especially when they're not cleaned. So the 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗁 were like, yeah, we'll take that. And that's why they're really eternal. That's why they go all the way back to the beginning of time. So that's what the 𝗂𝗄𝗃s are. They're the ceremonial meats, and they can only be processed by initiated people. There's no bigger taboo or sacrilege than putting an uninitiated cook to process those things, because the Orishas will smell it immediately and it's automatically tainted. So whoever handles that has to be initiated, and it's based on the initiation you have. So if you have Hand of Ifa, you could take out the 𝗂𝗄𝗃s for the Hand of Ifa process. If you have Orisha done, you could take out the 𝗂𝗄𝗃s for Orisha process. And people with Hand of Ifa can take out the 𝗂𝗄𝗃s for the Ifa process as well. And they have Orunmila, just on a different scale, but it's still Ifa. The significance is everything, because in the Odu Baba 𝗀𝗃𝗃 it says, and it's also known as Baba 𝗂𝗃𝗃, if the 𝗂𝗄𝗃s are not present, ita cannot be realized, because the Orishas need a reminder, hey, we ate, being that time has gone by, like the Pataki says. So that's why it's very key, and each Orisha likes their 𝗂𝗄𝗃s prepared a certain way. I won't delve into all that, but, they are as important as anything. So this is where things get a little scary, because, this is a very grueling and arduous process when done correctly. So, some people might get tired. They'll be like, okay, we killed all these hens, God bless. But we really don't have the energy or time or desire to process them all. So how about this? We'll just throw them all out, and we'll just order some food from Bravo, So there's no bigger sacrilege than that, because it literally taints a whole ceremony, because it's like 𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗁 says, if the 𝗂𝗄𝗃s are not present, there can be no 𝗂𝗃, there can be no blessing. So if you're going to get involved in these things, you have to understand it is grueling work. It is Navy SEAL caliber spiritual work. This is buds training spiritually. So when guys come to me, they're like, oh yeah, I want to do Ifa. I'm like, all right, that's awesome. You have all the prerequisites. You're going to come to the next Hand of Ifa, and you're going to take out 𝗂𝗃s. And I tell you, man, that's where you really know who somebody is, man, because around, the eighth hen, you start seeing whether somebody's ready for war, or they start fidgeting. I had one guy just leave.
Whoa.
Never heard from him again. He left his knives, he left everything.
What?
He couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle it. You know what I'm saying? Like, he literally told the other guy that was there, he said, "Oye, I gotta go." And he left his knives and everything, and I never saw him again, you know? And he was a guy, he was like, "No, I'm a hunter. No, I pull game, you know, deers. I process deers." I'm like, "Oh man, this will be easy." But yeah, he couldn't handle it. So, which is fine. This isn't for everybody. But if you can recognize it's not for you, please get out of the kitchen. But if this is for you, we need you. So yeah, that's how important or how impactful 𝘃𝗵𝗃 could be. Yeah. And the food to the witches, yeah.
All right, that was a good one.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so how many 𝗃𝗚𝗃s should be at the Hand of Ifa?
How many 𝗃𝗚𝗃s? Yeah.
𝗃𝗚𝗃s, yes.
So here's the thing. When you look at scripture, like in the Odu of 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲, it speaks of Orunmila always having two disciples with him, right? In one case, it was 𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗲, the student who ended up teaching Ifa to the world. And you also have 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗲 and 𝗹𝗵𝗔, which represent the right and left hands of Ifa, or the right and left hands of Orunmila, that he would function with. Ideally three. I haven't done one with less than three. I've never seen the need to. It just works. It's just perfect, you know. In 𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗃, I don't know, but I would imagine the three concept is there as well, because 𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃 are recognized for sure, or 𝗹𝗶𝗸𝗃 and 𝗹𝗔. You definitely can't just be one Babalao. You definitely, at least two. That's just, to do a Hand of Ifa by yourself is impossible, one way or the other, you know. Just to, you don't have enough hands. Let's start there. And no matter how knowledgeable you are, or how much retention you are, you need brothers there, because you'll be so focused on one topic, and a brother will be like, "Oye, this," and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, for sure." But you can't do it alone. You know, it's the same thing. Would you want a doctor doing surgery on you alone?
Right?
Absolutely not. Another thing is you want witnesses. Another thing is you want to see a varied group of gentlemen, like with reputations, and like, okay, everything's on the up and up here. I even invite people that aren't from my lineage, like that aren't my godsons, you know, depending on the situation. Like, my Ifas are some of the most varied Ifas, because I'll have 4 or 5 brothers there that aren't even from my house, that are just, you know, dudes that I met working in the street and whatnot, you know, from house to house. But you know, definitely at least 2. I'll never do less than 3. If anything, you know, usually it's more than 3. And if you're doing an 8-piece, which I don't do, I can't see how you're getting through that with less than 4 or 5. But, you know, 4 to 5 people, if all 3 brothers are prepared and proficient, you can get through with 3 of them. Comfortably 4, but never less than 3, in my opinion, for at least a 4-piece.
Wow. Okay. This has been great so far. We got one more question, but
nice.
If you guys are wondering how to actually contact us, you can go to the website at botanicacandlesandmore.com. You can click on the contact us button. That's a form you can fill out, or you can click on the Our Roots podcast tab. You can leave us a voice message. Real simple. It's a little button right there in the corner. You got about 3 minutes. Don't use all 3 minutes.
Yeah, right.
That's really long.
That's a party at that point. Yeah. You know, come on.
Yeah, or you can do what we normally do. Leave a comment on any of the YouTube videos, and Joseph is really good at getting back and answering
we're vigilant
all those questions. So the last question we have is, what is my Baba's role after initiation?
Very, very important topic, right? So the thing is there's always a honeymoon stage with everything, right? Oh my God. Hand of Ifa, you've come to Orunmila's home, and you're interested in Hand of Ifa. You're bringing a large sum of money. We're all enthusiastic. We're happy to have you. But what happens when that is done? What happens when the Hand of Ifa is done? The money has been presumably spent. Where do we go from here? And that really boils down to the character and preparation of the person that initiated you, as well as the efforts and discipline of the person being initiated. So what would ideally be the role based on somebody that, you know, is serious about Ifa and has come for the right reasons? This is your moment for growth. For anybody that's received Hand of Ifa, from the moment of the Hand of Ifa, study is huge. Now, why is the Babalawo or your godfather so important there is because ideally we've been spending our time before initiating people learning. So part of that knowledge comes with knowing how to interpret Ifa. So Ifa is like opening up a surgical textbook. Like, hey, the artery, the aorta, whatever, you can get lost very quickly if you're not prepared. So that's why really your godfather's role from an education standpoint is that of educator and guide, right? Hey, Padrino, I read this story. I have no idea what it means. Could you please clarify things? The ideal response is absolutely, this is what it means. The semi-ideal response is I'm going to get back to you immediately. Just let me get done with this. The unacceptable response is no response. So if you get to that point where now it's time to show and prove, and you notice that your professional is distant or focusing on your next ceremony or your next deity or the next opportunity for you to give them money, that might not be the situation. Not everybody that starts the movie makes it to the credits. The honeymoon stage is over. Now it's time for life. Now it's time for the painful part, the study and the accountability. I'll be frank with you. Phil, you know what our schedule's like.
Yeah.
I always get back to people, and I'm very communicative. I'll be like, hey, if it's a short answer, I'll give it to you right there. But if it's something that deserves an elaborate response, based on my obligation to you, let me get back to you within 48 hours. If it's something crazy, definitely before the end of the week. But if it's something crucial, I'll do it immediately because, if you're in those beginning stages, things that are crucial need to be addressed immediately because you don't have the independence to handle it on your own. That's why when people get past the Hand of Ifa and either crown or do Ifa with us, we're so big on teaching them how to empower themselves through process, right? Okay, you're Orisha, here, learn how to throw the shell. Here, this is how you feed Egun. Oh, here's how you direct the Orisha process. Or Babalawos, this is how you do 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗲, this is how you do Divination. All those things, because I might not be able to respond to you at that moment, and you might have a serious situation. So when you're not worried about getting funds out of your client, you empower them. Because at the end of the day, here's the thing. I'm going to be giving money to my godfather until the day I die. And you're looking at somebody who has Odu. You're looking at somebody that is an 𝗃𝗍𝗶. You're looking at somebody that is as self-sufficient as can be. There's very few things I can't do for myself. But the day I need to receive a deity, hey, Padrino, how much is that deity? Or, hey, Padrino, Ifa birthday, I zelled you this. The gentleman is going to be getting funds out of me for the rest of my life. Now, it's not abusive, but there's things I need done even for me. So that's the first thing that needs to be accepted. Now, apart from that, though, it doesn't need to be a factory. It doesn't need to be, hey, if you want to talk to me, you need to get consulted. That's ridiculous, because admission includes tuition. You should be stimulated from an educational standpoint based on what you've invested already. Another huge responsibility of the Babalawo that is actually going to have a spiritual house is continued and perpetual study. Because if you're somebody that's trying to grow and your elder is stagnant, there's going to get to a point where you can't stimulate each other on that level because they're going to be limited. Because you might be somebody that's really trying to take it to another level that professional is not trying to. Like, I could have stopped learning Ifa about 8 years ago, and I'd still be making a living, But I have passion. I have vocation. I have desire to keep growing because the more I delve into Ifa, the more I want to drown myself in this sacred scripture, forgive me. So not everybody has that drive. Not everybody has that desire. Some people are like, I'm good with just being 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍 or, doing ebo and things like that. And I have another business to focus on, and all of that is fine. But the most important thing is transparency, because when you put on this facade of, I'm learning, I'm growing, whatever you guys need, I'm here. But when the moments of rigor arrive and you're unable to respond, that doesn't help anybody. That's why back in the day, if you initiated with somebody who wasn't trying to grow anymore, they'd put you in contact like, hey, Mijao, you want to be an 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍? Beautiful. I'm not an 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍. I don't know how to do 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗍𝗍. But I'm going to put you in contact with the guy who directed our Ifa or your Ifa because he's my godbrother. So they weren't focused on that. There wasn't so much retention or trying to frustrate people. But now, the only thing on some people's minds is if I recommend that person to another person, I'll never get another dollar out of that person. Which is ridiculous, because whether they give you another dollar or not, we should have some satisfaction with just somebody pursuing and accomplishing their goals. But not everybody has that fortitude. Role of godparent or godfather after Hand of Ifa is that of facilitator. So, for example, on an annual basis, you have the obligation of ideally having your Eshu fed, your Ifa fed, maybe your Ori, right? Based on Hand of Ifa, but definitely the first two. You can't do that for yourself, so ultimately your godfather is there to provide that service based on compensation and schedule. That's a role. Another thing is picking up the phone in those difficult times, you know. It's very easy to accept the money and pick up the phone when someone's about to zell you. But what about, you know, hey, Padrino, I really need to talk to you. You know, I'm going through a difficult moment, or, you know, I'm feeling this, I'm having these thoughts. And, you know, I've had many of these conversations, and, you know, there's nothing more humbling than when you could be available to somebody that is in the darkest part of the hole and give them a hand to pull them out, you know? So if that's not satisfying enough, this is definitely isn't the spirituality for you, because you're definitely going to get more calls like that than more calls of, hey, I'm going to send you $100. So if you're not ready to bear that weight, this position of Olu or Padrino or Madrina or any of those things is not for you, because if you can't handle the difficult conversations, it's better not to take the money, because then it just spirals into a whole different situation. But that's the role: guide, facilitator, educator, accountable, you know, all of those things. And if you're not getting one of them, you know, that might not be the establishment for you.
I also like how you are willing to learn more, like continuing your education.
Oh, bro.
There's some people out here that they get to a certain level and then they just stop, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you and I share this trait that we can adapt and grow.
Yeah, like absolutely, Phil. Within within film and editing and podcasting and all the things you do, like even the things that even the information you've just been sharing with me off camera today, it's appalling what you can accomplish in a minute. So I think, brother, another thing is, you know, presumably we're going to be here for a while. What are we going to do with our time? You know, me and my godson, one of my godsons, he has this joke, and I always have this joke. I said, man, what are we doing? You know, we're knee deep in ceremony and everybody's covered in a bunch of different fluids and things like that. I just look at my man and I'm like, what are we doing? And one of them always says, we're just killing time, Padrino. And it just makes us all laugh, because, you know, it's the most fulfilling thing, but what else are we going to do? You know, this tradition is our mission. Like, what are we going to do? We can't let it die. So, you know, you have to keep learning, you know, I mean, and not everybody has that DNA, and that's okay, but everybody should to a certain degree, because, I mean, when you look at a condition like dementia, right, and you look at how preventable it is, you know, where the three things you need to do to be able to preserve your mind are to socialize, work, and read for leisure. You know, if you can accomplish those three things over a lifetime, you know, dementia and anything neurological is seemingly impossible. But apart from preserving the mind, we must preserve our body, you know, as soon as we have the opportunity to, you know, eating a certain way, ingesting certain things, activity levels. Those are the two aspects of our health. And mind you, the head represents maybe 10% of body mass, and it's more than 50% of what influences how well we're going to do or be. So there's really nothing else to do but learn. So if you haven't learned in a while, the brain is a muscle, and it's the one that might be most important, you know? So I couldn't live another way, brother. When I don't study Ifa, I get bad. I start, you know, I get frustrated, you know? But when you have children and things like that, for all the brothers and sisters out there that are trying to dedicate more time to their growth, understand that everything's situational. Not everything needs to be, I read 100 pages of Odu today. You know, just 1 to 2 good solid patakis a day, man. That'll separate you from the pack, because there's people that have never looked at the book at all. So, food for thought. Hand of Ifa is a beautiful process, man. I recommend it for all human beings, right? Not because of job security, but because knowing the miraculous effect it has had on people that I've been able to take through, and cases that I've heard. I haven't been present for every miracle, but I've seen people go into remission from stage 4 cancer, pancreatic. I've seen the barren become fertile. I've seen really miraculous things, man. Not just magical, miraculous. So it's not just a deity. It's not just a bullet in the chamber. It is a necessity and a priority.
Yeah, well, you want to know what else is pretty miraculous?
My members, dog.
Yeah. Look at that segue right there. All right, guys. This was a Very informative episode.
Oh,
This is top 5, man.
Yeah, sure.
Definitely top 5. A lot of information, and obviously we'll have more of these because you guys will be submitting your questions. But gotta show some love to the people who show love to you, and all that is a part of our membership program. And you can join our membership by clicking that join button directly under this video.
Get in there, guys.
We got 3 separate tiers, each offering 3 different distinct qualities and aspects, whether it's extra shows, discounts on merch, early releases, all that jazz. So make sure you join and hit that join button. So let's show some love to the people who show love to you.
Yep.
So this one, we're just going to spotlight the premium super fans. That's our mid tier, so our middle tier. So here we go. We got Candy.
Hey.
Premium super fan joined today.
Thank you.
We got DJ Hype Wave.
Okay.
All right, they are brand new.
Welcome.
We got Sun.
Okay.
Ramona Brown.
Very nice.
Bomani Poon Soto.
Yeah. Shout out to Bomani.
They've been around for about 7 months.
Oh yeah.
We got Florida WTR for Florida Water.
Very nice.
We got Hotlanta.
Thank you. There you go.
We got Jay Palacio. And rounding out premium super fans for today, we got Sage.
Very nice. Now, guys, apart from the membership program, be sure to look into our classes at Joseph Baba Ifa School. A couple going on, whether it be the 4-week curriculum or the Mojuba class. Great responses on both. Shout out to everybody that's already taken the advantage and opportunity. Botanica-candlesandmore.com is up and running for all your service and product needs. We ship almost everywhere. If you can't catch us on YouTube and the video cast, be sure to check us out audio through major apps like iHeartRadio, Apple, etc. We're there. Big thank you from all of us here at Our Roots Podcast. Until next time, see the light.
Baba knows the way.
Oh, man.
I'm not going to play it yet.
Oh, we got some big things coming. Phil, don't tease them.
Yeah, got to. All right, guys. Hey, if they stuck around that long,
oh, yeah,
little tease.
You'll know. If you know, you know. You'll know.
All right, see you guys.
Bye, guys.